tomorrow. So across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, a pretty wet picture overnight, some high rainfall totals, some strong blustery winds, and that rain later feeding into parts of northern and western England and Wales as well. Most places are going to see temperatures holding up in double figures, partly because of the unsettled weather. Then as we go through tomorrow morning, in the southeast, actually clinging on to some fine weather for a little while longer. So a dry start here, some early sunshine, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, a pretty cloudy and damp start to the day, and watch out for those blustery winds as well. Meanwhile, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, yes, the more persistent rain will have pushed through, but there will be plenty of showers around, and some of these showers will be fairly heavy. There could even be the odd rumble of thunder, maybe a bit of hail mixed in as we go through the day. Also need to be aware of the blustery winds. The strongest winds will be along the front as it goes through, but towards the north and west we could still be looking at some strong gusts in coastal parts. Meanwhile, towards the southeast, that rain eventually arrives as we head towards lunchtime and lingers for a time during the afternoon before eventually clearing away, and for all of us a bit of a fresher feel compared to recent days, despite the fact that there will be some sunshine on offer. Also some sunshine on offer as we go through Wednesday, but again we're likely to see a fair few showers around, most frequent, most widespread towards the north, but as we go through the afternoon they are going to pick up a little bit more across southern parts as well. More showery weather on offer as we go through the end of the week, and that cooler feel continues, though warm enough in any sunshine.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be our biggest winner yet. Touring in this stylish Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. This brand new 2025 model comes complete with kitchen and bathroom areas and enough space to comfortably sleep a family of 4. We'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to add a few of your favourite things. Don't miss out as lines close on the 6th of June. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. It's official. The Labour government has completely lost control of our borders, with channel crossings already 50% higher than the previous record for this stage of the year. We could have more than 70,000 illegal entrants in 2025. Meanwhile, a man has been convicted of burning a Quran outside the Turkish embassy. But is this an affront to freedom of speech, or is he just a yahoo? Reform has begun its attack on waste in Kent Council, with the beginnings of the British Doge underway. Plus, a certain State of the Nation regular will be removing his political hat and getting personal in his new book that reflects on his childhood in post-war Britain. Sir John Redwood joins for this evening's book club finale. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, as well as Sir John Redwood, State of the Nation's favourite socialist returns, the former Labour MP Stephen Pound. As always, I want to know your views. You know how to send them in, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you very much. The top stories. Defence Secretary John Healey says a new era for UK defence is needed as he pledged to make the British Army 10 times more lethal. In a statement to the House of Commons today, Mr Healey said the government will accept these 62 recommendations in the Strategic Defence Review. His comments come after Sir Keir Starmer says every citizen has a role to play as the UK shifts to full warfighting readiness in its most ambitious defence overhaul since the Cold War. The Prime Minister's announced 6 new munitions factories, 12 nuclear submarines and billions for AI, cybersecurity and missile defence, calling for innovation at wartime pace. Veterans Minister Alistair Cairns told GB News the government aims to get defence spending to 3% GDP by next Parliament, but failed to say exactly when.
Well, before we get into the detail, it's worth just stepping back. I spent 24 years in the military in quite specialist elements and sort of had insight into everything. And I don't think I can remember a period of time that has been so geopolitically fractious or fragile. So I think the Strategic Defence Review is exceptionally well timed. We've been really clear. We put in excess of £5 billion into this year into defence. By 2027, that will go up to £13 billion. And then we've also said that it can be delivered to move to 3% by the next Parliament.
In other news, a man's been found guilty of a religiously aggravated public order offence after burning a Quran outside the Turkish consulate in London. Hamid Koskin shouted anti-Islamic slurs as he set the text alight in Knightsbridge in February. Footage showed passers-by confronting and attacking him. The 50-year-old argued it was a protest against President Erdogan and a lawful act of free expression, but the court ruled his actions caused harassment and distress. Hamid said in a statement this afternoon that his conviction was an assault on free speech and will deter others from exercising their democratic rights. Police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann will carry out fresh searches in Portugal. The Metropolitan Police say they're aware of the searches set to be conducted by German Federal Police in Portugal, where Madeleine disappeared while on holiday with her family in the resort of Praia de Luz 18 years ago. A spokesperson for the Met Police said our service is not present at the search, but we will support our international colleagues where necessary. This is to be the first search in Portugal in over 2 years. And to the US, a man has been charged with a hate crime after people at a rally in support of Israeli hostages were targeted with petrol bombs and a makeshift flamethrower in Colorado. 45-year-old Mohammed Solomon has been charged with the federal crime of causing bodily injury because of actual or perceived race, colour, religion or national origin. US President Donald Trump vows to prosecute the attacker to the fullest extent of the law. 8 people were injured in that attack while the suspect shouted "Free Palestine." Police say the victims suffered serious burns. At least one person is in a critical condition. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt gave this update this evening.
Well, there's certainly a concern that the previous administration allowed way too many terrorists and illegal immigrants into the interior of our country, and that's why the Department of Homeland Security is working overtime to arrest, detain, and deport as many illegal criminals and terrorists that we can in the United States of America, and any act of violence will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
And those are the latest headlines for now.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. The most important duty of any government is defence of the realm, and within less than a year of taking office, this government has failed in this obligation. The Labour government has lost control of our borders. On Saturday, nearly 1,200 migrants crossed the Channel in 19 small boats. So far this year, nearly 15,000 have entered the country. And as you can see on your screen, they are all young men. This puts us on track for yet another record year. The previous one was set in 2022. On current trends, we could see more than 70,000 crossings. Over the weekend, the government itself admitted it had lost control. But not only has it lost control, its plan has manifestly failed. Labour promised to smash the gangs and clear the backlog, and this always sounded a bit dodgy. Yet the first thing it did upon entering office was to repeal the Rwanda legislation purely from political naivety. Rwanda was the only viable deterrent, and I suspect the government is now beginning to regret its short-sighted decision. It introduced some of its smash-the-gang strategy, but the numbers speak for themselves and prove this has had no effect, whilst we give millions of pounds to the French, who sit idly by and wave them merrily on their way with garlic sandwiches, I think. Meanwhile, the government's Borders Bill surreptitiously decriminalised illegal migration, which gives them a route to citizenship, and we are seeing the language of irregular migration being introduced. It's no wonder the numbers are rising rapidly. Labour doesn't believe that there is such a thing as illegal migration. It essentially has the socialist view of open borders. And now we hear talk of return hubs, which is more smoke and mirrors. Labour's return hubs plan is only for failed asylum seekers, people who've had their applications rejected. But under the current system, more than 70% of applications are being accepted. If Labour was serious about stopping the boats, it should leave the ECHR. The rights prescribed by the Convention make deportations practically impossible, not least because of its broad interpretive method. If we left, we could ban appeals for illegal entrance. Second, it should withdraw from the Refugee Convention. The Convention draws the definition of a refugee so widely that it could apply to 750 million people around the world, 10 times the UK population. And third, it should restore the deterrent of Rwanda. Only when illegal migrants know that upon entering the country, they would be immediately sent either to Rwanda or their home, they would think about the journey twice. Problem, of course, is that Labour isn't serious about stopping the boats. Labour doesn't care about borders, and that is precisely why we will see a new record number of migrants crossing the Channel this year. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. Now, I'm really delighted to be joined by the former Deputy Prime Minister, Michael the Lord Heseltine, to discuss this. He won't know that when I got appointed Minister for Government Efficiency, I took in a copy of his memoirs because he was one of the few people who managed to make the government efficient when he held office. Anyway, Lord Heseltine, thank you for joining me. I think we will not get migration under control as long as we are members of the European Convention on Human Rights, and that we need to domesticate our law. But I understand that's not your view.
No, your problem, William, is you're obsessed with the European relationship, and we'll never solve the migration problem unless we do it on a European scale. And the quicker we recognise the scale of what's happening and the scale of the increase that is likely to come, the quicker we will seek accord with our European neighbours and pursue a policy designed to cope with the scale of the problem.
But we've seen just in the last week a number of European neighbours suggest that the European Court should be reformed, and the British government hasn't joined that. So we're not even joining with our European neighbours in trying to get the European Court under control.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. That's exactly the futile problem that Brexit has delivered. We have absented ourselves from the corridors of power in Europe. And the quicker we wake up to that and get back at the table and negotiate Britain's self-interest in the forum of Europe, the better chance we have of dealing with this problem.
But as you know perfectly well, it's nothing to do with Brexit. This is to do with the Council of Europe, where we are still members. It's not an EU matter, it's a Council of Europe matter, where we are still members. We just haven't got involved because...
It's all part of the Brexit dialogue. I mean, your whole introduction to this programme this evening was all about attacking the Labour control of the borders. The Tories had no more control than the Labour Party. It's an escalating problem which needs a European solution.
Well, that's not quite right, because we had the Rwanda scheme, which was on the cusp of beginning to act as a deterrent. Indeed, we'd seen people go to the Republic of Ireland rather than coming to the UK before the Rwanda scheme was in, and that it's the convention, not the commission, that is affecting us in relation to illegal migration.
The Rwanda scheme didn't repatriate one single immigrant. And you know it. It never worked. It was never going to work. And the idea that the Rwandans were going to accept 50,000 immigrants coming from this country, or that we were going to persuade them to go there, is simply unrealistic. And the whole failure of this issue goes back much further than this government. It is the part... I'll tell you what the problem is, that all over the world, people have got these things and they see the standards of living we enjoy in this country. They are young, ambitious, and they want to share in the action. And until we actually come to some sort of rational European policy, we will be faced with this enormous number of people crossing into Europe from the Mediterranean, the Adriatic, and the Turkish border.
But we have the great advantage of the Channel and a sea border that we can protect, and that we could remove people if we had the determination to do it. And the thing that stopped Rwanda was the Supreme Court ruling on the basis of the Refugee Convention and the European Convention on Human Rights. That's what's stopping us. That's why we need to pull out of those to make decisions for ourselves.
If we could have our Rwanda scheme, you were in power and you couldn't make it work. And the fact is, it was never going to work because it was never big enough to deal with the scale of the problem. And what one's got to understand about this issue is what we've now seen for 80 years is peace in Europe and the creation of a single market, which was Margaret Thatcher's single greatest achievement. That has been fractured by the dialogue about Brexit and the racial undertones that lie with it. And all of this is festered with the immigrant problems that we're talking about. The only realistic solution is to stop the flow of immigrants at the borders of Europe.
We stop the flow of immigrants at the borders of the United Kingdom, and it's not to do with peace. Peace is through NATO, as you know perfectly well, as a very distinguished former Secretary of State for Defence, and that actually we took in 6 million people from the EU who managed to get settled status. And the problem of migration that so annoyed and upset voters, one of the reasons they voted for Brexit, was they didn't want this uncontrolled migration, legal or illegal. They want secure borders. And we can only provide that if we leave the European Convention and the Refugee Convention.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think that, first of all, leaving the Court of Convention would be a major step back. We have had 80 years of peace in Europe because we have a code of law which actually governs the way we all behave. And this is completely contrary to the history of our country, which has sent over generations, over hundreds of years, the young people to die on virtually unremembered incidents, which actually arose because the politicians failed to get agreement, failed to have some sort of accord, and then were responsible to watch the wars that developed. And all of that has come to an end because we have come to sanity in our arrangements with our Europeans.
All right. Well, it's a great pleasure to have you on, Lord Hasseltine, one of the most distinguished Conservatives of the Thatcher period. Thank you for joining me. But now with me is the Shadow Policing Minister, Matt Vickers. Michael Hussel's a great man, was very powerful in government, but actually his analysis of this is wrong, that the European Convention is what has stopped us getting rid of people. It was the Supreme Court that prevented the last government from getting the Rwanda scheme running. How can the Conservatives make it work if we were in government in future?
I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years of history in our relationship with Europe. Actually, this hasn't been going on for hundreds of years in its current setting. It's a recent phenomenon in that sense. Globally, there are more people on the move than ever before. It is a complete mess, whether it be legal migration or whether it be illegal migration. We saw legal migration starting to come down now as a result of measures we brought forward when the Conservatives were in office, about stopping people bringing their mum and their dad and their gran and everybody else, all these dependents that we were bringing, which was the right thing to do. We should have seen in April the introduction of a threshold on salaries that required people to be earning £38,000 in order, well, £38,000, 700 and something, in order to be able to bring people with them, to pay their way, to pay into the system and all of the costs that come with that. But then on illegal migration, we're seeing it record levels. People might have said this was terrible, it was broken, it wasn't working, we weren't fixing it. Actually, when the last government left office, the numbers were beginning to come down. The number of people in hotels was coming down massively because we stopped opening hotels and we said that isn't a thing. But actually, we had a deterrent in place. Rwanda, wherever it might be, actually, everyone talks about Rwanda and says, oh, it's far, far away. But
the further away, the better.
The further away, the better. But in real terms, it didn't matter. It was about the principle in law that if you arrived in this country illegally, you should be detained and you should be removed. You should either be sent back to your own country, as we did with Albania. We saw Albania were one of the top places from which people were arriving. All of a sudden, we started sending those people back, and the numbers of arriving went down by 93%. You know, it's not rocket science. If people arrive here and realise it's not worth their while, they stop paying those heinous, vile people smugglers to smuggle them into the country.
And that's one of the really important things, isn't it? That the people bringing them over are evil people smugglers, criminals who are making a lot of money out of this, and that the way to smash the gangs is actually to stop the incentive for coming here.
Stop that motivation. If people realise that they get in that boat and they're not going to get to stay, they will stop coming. We were going to detain them. The legislation was in place, and actually the Labour Party have ripped all that out. They're going to have to start again. In a few months' time, they're going to realise this is a damned mess, and they're going to have to bring forward legislation to do exactly what we were doing. It didn't matter where you were sending them. Rwanda was the catch-all, so we were sending them back to where they came from, where we could get those agreements in place. But there are countries where you can't send them back and you need to find somewhere else. So now those people who were going to be in Rwanda are in Redcar and Romford and Richmond and places across this country because we're not sending them anywhere.
And you can't send them back yet. And I noticed that Denmark is doing very well in getting its numbers down on the basis that any application for asylum is temporary and that you will be sent home when your country is safe. And that Syria has changed enormously in the last year and may be much closer to being safe than it was. Currently, we take over 90% of asylum seekers from Syria. But if they come here illegally and they don't then have a pathway to citizenship, because we'd said if you came here illegally you would never get citizenship, then sending them home at the end of the process is much more simple, more straightforward.
And the current government have sent a message to the world. They've said that if you come here illegally, they've actually repealed legislation to allow people who arrive here illegally to become British citizens. If that isn't a flag to say come to Britain, if that isn't the red carpet, what is?
OK. But why won't you, stiffen your sinews, summon up the blood and imitation the actions of a tiger and say we've just got to pull out the European Convention?
I'm going to be tiger-like, and I'm going to tell you that we put forward amendments to that legislation on several things. So the Labour Party brought forward its own borders bill that removed all of the ability we had to detain and remove people who'd arrived here illegally. It allowed people to become British citizens who'd arrived here illegally. And we applied two major amendments, one of them being that if you committed any crime, if you committed a criminal act and you'd come to this country, you should be deported. And secondly, we said we would disapply the Human Rights Act and interim judgments from the court.
But the disapplication couldn't stop people applying to the European Court, so they would get the judgment in the end.
They wouldn't be here when they applied. So we said we wouldn't allow interim judgments, so they would be removed. But actually, when you look at Chicken Nugget Gate, Chicken Nugget, a horrendous situation where you saw
migrants live on GBNews to see how good they were. They were delicious. We'd better stop on that happy note of Chicken McNuggets not being an excuse to being a British citizen. Anyway, thank you very much to Matt. In a moment, should it be illegal to burn a Quran? We'll be bringing you an early look at Patrick Christie's interview with the man who has been convicted earlier today. Thank you very much.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You have the power then. Yeah, as I say, now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Today I'm joined by a nurse and an abuse survivor, Karen Danson. Now, when working at the County Durham and Darlington NHS Foundation Trust, she says that she had to beg her bosses not to let her male-born nurse, identifying as a woman, use their changing rooms, so the female changing rooms. Karen was abused by her father as a child, and this brought back traumas relating to years of abuse. Now, Karen and other Darlington nurses have launched a discrimination claim against their employees. This claim is still progressing, notwithstanding the recent Supreme Court judgment. Can you take us back a little bit to what happened to you as a child to give us an idea of why you were so nervous about this individual entering a female-only space?
Yeah, so I was sexually abused by my dad when I was a child. It started when I was 6 years old, and it was like 3 times a week, every week for 6 years. It left me with PTSD. Like I say, here I am as an adult, as a nurse trying to give back to people, and I walk into work one day after shift, and there's a man in my changing room, you know, and I didn't know how to react. I thought I was in the wrong place. I thought I'd maybe walked into the wrong changing room. He's there half dressed. As I'm walking down to my locker, you know, he's saying to me, "Are you not getting changed yet?" And I was like, "No." And then he asked me again, and I started panicking, thinking, you know, why is he asking me if I want to get changed? Is he wanting to provoke a reaction? Does he actually want me to get changed in front of him? And then when he asked me a third time, "Are you not getting changed yet?" That was it. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of there. It just reminded me so much of the trauma that I'd experienced with my dad.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Oh, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, a man has been found guilty of a religiously aggravated public order offence after burning a Quran outside the Turkish consulate in London. Hamit Koskan will be appearing on Patrick Christie's programme shortly.
London, they send me messages saying that they'll find me where I am and they'll just cut my throat.
İslam'ın gerçeği bu işte.
This is the truth of Islam.
Well, I don't think Quran burnings are in good taste. Indeed, I would disapprove of people burning a Bible. But we aren't a theocracy, and we abolished blasphemy laws some time ago, so the ruling seems to trespass on freedom of speech. Well, I'm joined now by my most intellectual panel, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP and current Socialist Stephen Pound. John, let me come to you first, because we're both strongly in favour of freedom of speech. We think it's very important. But this man was deliberately antagonistic. He went outside the Turkish embassy, he swore at people, he was causing public disorder and a public nuisance, even if he'd been burning a copy of The Times, heaven forfend.
Yes, and I think courts have very difficult judgments to make about that sort of thing. And I strongly and passionately believe in free speech, as you do, but I do think if you want to do an effective protest, you need to explain what the protest was about. And he just seemed to want to provoke people about their religion on a very sensitive matter. And so I think he was quite wrong to do that in his own terms. We didn't learn from his protest what he was actually complaining about. We may learn about it now after he's being sentenced.
And therefore it's reasonable that there are laws to stop this type of public disorder. If you view it as a public disorder issue, then it's reasonable. If he'd burnt a Quran in a studio and broadcast it, would we think that was reasonable? Where are the barriers on this, the lines to be drawn?
I don't think any of us know, do we? This is the problem. And that's why I think we do leave it to the courts. And I do think they're very difficult judgments to make. And I haven't got all the evidence on this one to know whether I think they got it right. But I do think we all have some kind of duty who believe in free speech to use it intelligently. And I think going out of your way to annoy someone about their religion in a way that matters very much to them is not a terribly sensible thing to do.
I mean, Stephen, where would you draw the line? We're both Catholics. If somebody were to burn the Bible, do you think that person should be prosecuted?
No, I think we're actually bigger than that in our faith. To be honest, I don't feel threatened in the same way that some people feel threatened by iconography and the destruction of it. Look, freedom of speech doesn't give you the right to shout fire in a crowded cinema, as famously has been said. This chap, I have to say, I think the Mental Health Act needs to be invoked here, because basically, you know, this thing in America called suicide by cop, you know, where people provoke the police to such a point. This chap is almost begging for it, and I think he's a danger to himself. He's a danger to the public, because he's acting in an outrageous way which actually does cause public disturbance. Now, my point would be, it's not the act of the burning of the Quran, it's what the consequence of that is around. And your point is interesting. If he did it in his back garden and nobody saw it, you know, it's like, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there, does it matter? I think the particular issue here is more of a public, of a mental health thing.
OK, so what if he went to Hyde Park Corner, to Speaker's Corner, and burnt a Quran there? Would you say that should be protected? Because I probably would.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm worried about some of the things that people are prohibited from saying at Speaker's. I think Speaker's Corner should be an absolute taboo. You should say what you want at Speaker's Corner. Yeah. We then get into incredibly difficult words about certain words which are so toxic nowadays that none of us can even mention them. But you know, I can remember, you know, Methodist bishops standing on soapboxes in Hyde Park Corner. You know, and nobody actually. Some of the things you heard, but I had Oswald Mosley and his bodyguard Kid Isaacs speaking there. I've heard lots of people speak there. They've got the right to. This is a different matter. This is a man who's been utterly and deliberately provocative. He's got an issue with the Turkish embassy. He's Turkish himself. He's got an issue with Islam. So let's actually, as you say, find out what is behind this.
But haven't we always got to defend freedom of speech when it's difficult? And when it's the three of us having a civilised conversation, it's really easy. It's these cases where you say, actually, he's caused offence, but freedom of speech is more important.
Well, this is the lines attributed wrongly to Voltaire. You know, I disagree with what you say, but I defend to the death the right to say it. And I think all of us would disagree with this particular act. It's a stupid, ridiculous thing to do. However, ultimately, is it the blasphemy aspect, which you quite rightly honed in on, or is it the public order aspect?
It's the public order aspect which the court needs to take seriously, obviously. And those of us who passionately believe in free speech, as we do, we don't think it's limitless. I mean, you don't have a right to go to Speaker's Corner and to urge people to join in going to raid the local shop, smashing the window in, stealing all the goods.
It's the religiously aggravated bit of it that becomes more difficult, isn't it? So, as a straight public order offence, I think we're all agreed that there may have been a case to answer. But when you throw in a special protection for religion, isn't that the bit that undermines freedom of speech?
If that's what the court was doing, but I think the court was probably saying something different.
Well, I think it's what the law does. I mean, I'm not blaming the court, because I think the law does give a special protection for religion. Hence the religiously aggravated element of it.
It is interesting, because
but it has to be an underlying problem before it's sort of aggravated.
But all right, sorry to cut you off, Stephen, but I'm now joined by the Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor. Thank you very much for joining me. Do you think that it would be fair for somebody to burn a Bible?
It will not be fair to burn any book. Books are a representation of our civilized world, enlightenment, process of knowledge, how we share it with one another.
All right, well, we'll have to get back to you, Stephen. I don't know if you heard that. He was saying you shouldn't burn any book.
Yeah, well, I think that's a little bit broad. I have to say, we've had plenty of book burnings. I mean, you know, the Reichstag was the obvious example. You can think of certain situations in the southern states of America, you know, where copies of To Kill a Mockingbird. You know, where on earth do you stop? And I think let's try to hone in on the facts. Let's drill down about this. We talk about blasphemy. This isn't about blasphemy. This is about public order. Now, I've been on many a dark march and demonstration, mostly on pro-life issues, where people have been actually stood up opposite me, mocking our Lord and Saviour, mocking the crucifix, mocking Christ, mocking the Catholic Church. And I don't react to that, because that's what they want us to do. You know, I like to think that we can actually rise above that. And I think what's in our hearts is more important, not what's on a piece of wood.
Let me go back to my downline guest. Imam, thank you for sticking with us and the technical problems being dealt with. What Stephen was just saying is that religions should rise above this. They shouldn't allow themselves to be offended by people who are trying to cause a bit of a stir. Do you agree with that?
for a second. We had no control over that. The original question that I began answering, just to finish that, any book is a demonstration of our knowledge, our civilized behavior. If I have a problem with a book, I should write a book against it. I should have a counter discussion like you're holding or any other discussion. Burning a book is a depiction of something rather crude, rather sad and sinister, and I don't condone that ever. I think we should never burn a book. Secondly, the question about religion and people's right to criticize. We all have the right to criticize. If I don't like something that you say, I must have the right to challenge you, and you must have the right to challenge me. But of course, in a civilized world, we'll do it with courtesy. We'll do it with decorum. We'll do it with some respect. So given all of that, what this gentleman did actually was being nuisance rather than doing I don't think the judge was even interested in religion. He was just interested in the fact that this guy was being public nuisance.
Yes, that's a really interesting point. So you're basically agreeing, and I don't know if you heard him, with what Sir John Redwood was saying, that it's a matter of public order, and that actually if somebody burnt a Quran or a Bible in private or didn't cause a public nuisance whilst doing it, that wouldn't be an offence in itself. The offence is the public nuisance. Is that the view you're coming to?
Yes, I teach my children all the time that don't ever display your anger and frustration of something that you disagree with by becoming stupid. If you are trying to get a message across, your message must be good, and the manner in which you get the message across must also be good. And therefore, what the discussion here is, of course, if a person wants to burn a book at a private level, go ahead, good luck. That's not going to change anything. If you want to discuss and have a discourse, come out in public and discuss and have a discourse in a civilized manner. We will all welcome it.
Well, I agree with you entirely. I think whenever you lose your temper in an argument, you lose the argument. Thank you so much for joining me. In a moment, Reform has commenced its Doge Commission in Kent Council, and we'll be bringing you the inside story.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
And looking further afield, there's plenty of warm sunshine, not as hot as recent days, with the risk of thunderstorms, but it is going to be breezy across the Canary Islands and parts of Madeira. Plenty of sunshine across Portugal and southern parts of Spain, but there are going to be frequent showers and thunderstorms across the Alps, plenty of sunshine across parts of Italy and Greece, and we hold on to plenty of warm sunshine as we go through the week. Few showers around, but highs up to the high 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Now, things are going to take a bit of a change as we go through the next 24 hours. There's some heavy rain, some strong winds pushing through, and a slightly fresher feel following in behind. It's all due to a cold front that is coming in from the northwest, and it's going to progress southeastwards across the whole country as we go through the rest of today and tomorrow. So across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, a pretty wet picture overnight, some high rainfall totals, some strong blustery winds, and that rain later feeding into parts of northern and western England and Wales as well. Most places are going to see temperatures holding up in double figures, partly because of the unsettled weather. Then as we go through tomorrow morning, in the southeast, actually clinging on to some fine weather for a little while longer. So a dry start here, some early sunshine, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, a pretty cloudy and damp start to the day, and watch out for those blustery winds as well. Meanwhile, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, yes, the more persistent rain will have pushed through, but there will be plenty of showers around, and some of these showers will be fairly heavy. There could even be the odd rumble of thunder, maybe a bit of hail mixed in as we go through the day. Also need to be aware of the blustery winds. The strongest winds will be along the front as it goes through, but towards the north and west we could still be looking at some strong gusts in coastal parts. Meanwhile, towards the southeast, that rain eventually arrives as we head towards lunchtime and lingers for a time during the afternoon before eventually clearing away, and for all of us a bit of a fresher feel compared to recent days, despite the fact that there will be some sunshine on offer. Also some sunshine on offer as we go through Wednesday, but again we're likely to see a fair few showers around, most frequent, most widespread towards the north, but as we go through the afternoon they are going to pick up a little bit more across southern parts as well. More showery weather on offer as we go through the end of the week, and that cooler feel continues, though warm enough in any sunshine.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, could this be Reform's Javier Milei moment? Well, for those of you who've watched Meet the Rees Moggs on Discovery, I'm going to be asking Sean if I can borrow his chainsaw to imitate the President of Argentina. Anyway, Reform's chairman, Zia Youssef, has announced Kent Council's Doge project, with software engineers, data analysts and forensic auditors being sent in to review how taxpayer money is being spent. I'm joined now by Reform's press spokesman, former Gwen Towler, as well as my most intellectual panels, John Redwood and Stephen Pound. Gwen, thank you very much for joining me. Can you actually do this? Because so much of the money councils spend is actually
between
set up by
70 and 80% is statutory spending, and we understand. But even amongst that, there are questions to be asked how it's spent. There is waste within that spend. But I mean, looking at that, I think we're more sort of Massey Ferguson than we are Chainsaw. Look. We were elected on a very specific... This was a promise that we would do a forensic audit. I've seen the letter that the chairman has sent to, with the leader of the Kent Council, that's sent to the chief executive of the council, and wanting to see the books, that not just the books that the councillors normally see, but a really proper deep dive. The young man they brought in has he's had a number of businesses, some have failed, but there's this weird thing in the UK where failure is seen as the end of your game, whereas I think it's quite the opposite. Failure is how you learn.
But what sort of things are you looking to cut? Are you going to reduce the services available for the elderly in nursing homes? No. Are you going to cut people's pensions?
Well, actually, the pensions, the gold plated. How many people in this country these days have a final salary pension? Very, very, very few.
But lots in the public sector.
But lots in the public sector. So we are looking at that. There again, we're also looking at how the council pension funds are operating. I mean, they talk about the 11.8 billion that the councils control. There's something like 50 billion in pension funds that are controlled by committees on those councils. Now, there you see there's supposed to be a fiduciary duty of making the most money as you possibly can in these things. Currently, they're spending it on quite a few, should we say, more woke things rather than making money things. So, yes, the idea that taxpayers and ratepayers are funding final salary pension schemes for council workers, I think is wrong.
Okay.
I just think it's wrong.
So how many diversity officers do you think they've got, and what are you going to do about them?
Well, I suspect if there aren't that many diversity officers in there, I'm aware of that. But the diversity agenda isn't so much the single officer on a 60,000 salary. It's actually all the waste of time, the waste of effort, the destruction of productivity. One of the greatest problems we've got in this country is public sector productivity levels. It is appalling. And a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but some time that is important is spent on courses to tell people to be decent. Well, I think most people in this country are decent.
Are you going to get people back into the office to do some proper work?
That's absolutely part of the game, yes.
And Gwen's got a really interesting point on pensions, because the House of Commons pension scheme invests in special green things and things like that. It has a part of it that is...
Which aren't very productive, actually.
Well, precisely, this is the point.
This is the point.
This is the point. So we might cut the final salary pension scheme, but if we actually improve the productivity and the results of the pension scheme by taking it away from low value investments in green and other, dare I say, woke investments, and actually put it into high earning investments. That might be a better way of doing it.
Just make a number of enemies of my former colleagues. I was on the Ealing Council for 16 years, and one of the first things we did when things started to get a little bit tight was to realise that one of the major problems everybody has in local government is you roll on the budget year after year. What we did was base zero accounting. Every year you start from base nothing, and then you say, what is statutory, what is additional? Because the real problem, we all know, at the end of the financial year, you suddenly see the roads being painted, the potholes...
Oh, yeah, but just spend it now, or you won't get it next year.
But that's outrageous. So, I mean, I take your point about 70% is statutory spending, and that's all spoken for. The other 30% is still a hell of a lot of money.
It is, but the things you can cut are things like painting the park railings. It's things like libraries. People like these things. You don't want to, but you do want to see greater efficiency, and I think there is a problem of inefficiency.
But you can be a lot smarter. I mean, people don't go to libraries to take books out anymore. What we do around my part of the world is our libraries are now open practically 7 days a week. For a lot of people who kids don't have anywhere to study, they come to the library to study. We have chess clubs. We have a whole load of literary
for older people, you've got Wetherspoons.
Yeah, but it's a community hub in the way that pubs once were.
As I say, Wetherspoons are.
But this is the real test for reform, isn't it? That if you can do this, you suddenly become a serious task.
Well, I think the test for reform isn't to be brilliant. I don't think anybody expects our councils to be brilliant. But the test is to be competent and maybe a little bit better than the people
and
we
you've
replace.
got to do it from day one. And having been a county councillor and fought the battle of the budget, and looking at the Kent County battle of the budget, I see that the outgoing council say that they got 96 million credited, mainly cost reductions, because there were those inefficiencies, and they've got an ongoing inefficiency programme. I wish your councillors every success. It's absolutely vital this country grapples with this low productivity problem.
And that is, I think,
you're not going to do it by an external audit. You're going to do it by councillors taking a serious interest. The evidence is all on the website. I mean, I look at it today, and there's plenty of information about how they're spending and misspending the money.
There's also a lot of information that's
But you need councillors who do the detail and then engage with the officers and persuade the officers, because otherwise they run rings around you.
Well, I think that I'm absolutely certain that quite a lot of the senior officials, the officers and councils, there's a sort of a love-hate relationship with the new reform lot who've turned up. There's oh my gosh, what are they going to do? One, and we can pull the wool over their eyes, being the second thought. I think they'd be a little bit sanguine. Looking at the sort of people we've had elected up and down the country in those councils, we've got some very, very able people. Some will not be brilliant, of course, that's human nature. But the majority are good people who are absolutely committed. The enthusiasm. There was an event about a week and a half after the election, so first week, second week of May, on the Saturday at Church House. And all the people who were elected were invited. And of the 674 we got elected, over 450 turned up a week and a half later. That is a huge number of people to come up, and the start of the training started then. There was a significant... and the
wish you well with it, but I mean, I think the immediate response to the establishment, as it has been for the past and new government in Whitehall, is for the officials say, it's all right, we can probably make efficiency gains, but you've got to spend to save, minister or councillor. Yes. And we want a whole load of AI, and it's going to take us 6 months to do a study, 6 months to build a budget.
I think we're not that
modernisation.
No, but you've got to say no to that.
100%.
Spend to save is very often a great con.
We need a working party.
Thank you to Gawain into
yes, Minister.
Indeed, thank you to Gawain and my panel. Coming up, what does an Oxford scholar, politician and businessman remember most vividly about being a toddler in post-war Britain? John Redwood will be sharing the small moments that left a lasting mark in just a moment in the latest iteration of State of the Nation's Book Club.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nigel is back.
Good evening.
Unfiltered.
Are these proposals bold enough?
Uncompromising.
Will it bring growth?
Unmissable.
We as a country are brilliant.
Nigel Farage returns tomorrow from 7 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. We were talking about council efficiency and what reform is doing, and the mail Moggs have come in. June says, it's amazing this hasn't been done before. It's standard practice in the private sector. And Dave says, hear, hear, if they can save either 5 or 10% across these councils, it will show they can do the job. Well, now it's time for the State of the Nation Book Club. For this evening's State of the Nation Book Club, we're joined by a friend of the programme, Sir John Redwood. In his latest book, John steps away from politics to reflect on the unusually vivid memories of his childhood in post-war Britain. In What Do Boys Want, he explores what it meant to grow up as a boy in a time when expectations were clear and roles rarely questioned. From early memories in the pram to his first day at school, he also raises some important questions. Are boys born with certain traits, or do they learn them as they grow? And how has our view of boyhood changed over time? Well, the man himself is still with me, Sir John Redwood. Thank you very much for staying on after the panel. One of the things that fascinates me is, unlike anybody else I know, you have memories from really being tiny in the pram, even of having your nappy changed, which other people just don't have. This is very remarkable, but gives you such an early insight into what life is like.
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote the book, because I'd mentioned to a few people I had these memories and discovered this was unusual. And I was scrupulously honest with myself. These are all things that I don't have photographs of and adults haven't told me about subsequently. And of course, my early memories are before I had any language, and so it was mainly smells and feelings that you had. But there I was, this tiny little thing in this grown-up world, and when I became a toddler, you had to go mountaineering to sit down because the chairs were all too big. And you were trying to work out what these adults wanted you to do because you couldn't understand the language and they were babbling on. It was a mystery world as a little kid.
And I think there's a lot to learn in that from how you look after children, in that you need to have some understanding of how big these spaces are that they're in, and also that they only understand very, very limited things early on, and it's therefore quite confusing.
Yes, it is very confusing. And what the book also does is it looks at your relationship as a little boy, which is with your mother. And I had a stay-at-home mother who was an extremely good mother in that she made sure I was clean and tidy and went to bed at a sensible time and was fed. But she was in this grown-up female world, housewife world, and I was in this little boy world. And so I chart some of the mini conflicts we had because I had such a different view of what my bedroom was or how you played with toys than the way she did.
Your teddy bear and your lion, which is a chapter that you didn't want your teddy bear dressed up in clothes because it was a bear, and you preferred your lion, which your mother thought was a nasty, smelly thing and needed to be taken off to be washed.
Yeah, that's right. And that was a sort of saga which went on what seemed like quite a long time, because here was a little boy thinking that these are my soft toys, and I've got this big old friendly lion, I want to play with that. And this mother wanted to dress this little bear up as a doll. And I had a natural aversion to dolls. I wasn't told not to like dolls. I just didn't want to play with a doll. I sensed that's not what boys did, you know.
But this is one of the things I've found very strongly with my own children, is that you were very early on, and children are very early on, their own person. They are not an extension of their mother and their father. They think different things. They do different things. You, dare I say, were quite a stubborn little boy, but that was your personality coming through very early.
Well, I felt I had to be stubborn because I think you've always got that wish to survive, and trying to survive in this big world is quite difficult. And it's not a criticism of your parents. I mean, you know that they love you. Well, you didn't see it like that, but you relied on them completely in your early stages. But you still were very conscious that you were very vulnerable. And sometimes they would do things to you that thought weren't safe. I remember being taught to walk, and I was very happy walking on two legs as long as I could hold their hand. And then they kept wanting to drop the hand to prove to me that I could walk, and I knew I couldn't. And then you were really afraid and you fell over. And then I discovered that I could start teaching myself to walk by holding on to rather high up chairs and getting my way around like that to get some practice in, because they wanted me to walk on two legs, because it was much easier for me to scoot around on fours. I got very fast at that.
But being your own person, being stubborn, saved you from what could have been a very dangerous medicine when your mother reached for something that was in a medicine bottle that was in fact bleach or something rather than the medicine.
Yeah, my poor mother, yes, and that was a nightmare for her, and I never spoke to her again after it, because I was a bit older by then, realised that it was a dreadful mistake she'd made, and it wasn't what she wanted to do to me. And I was saved because I didn't understand it. She said I was ill, I didn't think I was ill, and then she wanted to give me this medicine, and it was actually the smell of the thing that put me off, although I didn't realise that at the time, and I just said, I'm not taking this, stubbornly. And eventually she smelt it, and she went white as a sheet because she suddenly realised.
And you never mentioned it to your mother because you knew it would upset her. So you were a sensitive child. You understood what your parents
I was older then and I understood that. And so I never mentioned that again. And I knew she was horrified. And for once, it was very useful to her that her kid was a bit stubborn.
Indeed.
Because I'd avoided a major disaster, you know.
And your early schooling, again, you're very focused. You know what you want to do when you get to school, and you respond well to the teachers who encourage you.
Yes, indeed. Because I was an only child, I had some older boys I played with when I was at home, but I wanted more company. So to me, going to school was a great opportunity to socialise with all these other kids. And so on day one, I say goodbye to my mother at the school gate and get on with it. And she was a bit hurt by that, I subsequently learned, because she thought she needed to mother me into the school, and I just wanted to be a grown-up little kid, you know.
Yes.
And then it was a revelation, because suddenly there was a world my size, because in my little primary school, there were chairs and tables my size that I could actually move, whereas at home, trying to move a chair, you needed somebody to come and help you because it was too heavy and it was quite dangerous, you know. So that was fantastic.
And do you think parents should be more sensitive to this size issue and how they look after children? Do you think this book is an aid to parents?
Well, I hope so. If I've remembered a bit more than others, these were things that I always bore in mind when I was trying to be a father, but nobody gets it all right. But it's quite helpful to try and think yourself into the mindset of the little one and what they're facing. And for example, when you go on walks, I was taken on walks and there were quite high hedges and never saw anything.
Yes,
then
I would, lifted up.
I would nag my dad, and eventually, joy of joys,
Yes.
I was on his shoulder, and it was amazing.
See everything.
Gosh, this is what you guys are seeing, you know?
But can we imagine putting John on our shoulders? Anyway, thank you very much. Up next is the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, whose shoulders will you be on this evening?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about that. I'll do my best to carry the nation through to 11 p.m, of course. But yes, so big show tonight. I was out and about exposing the ridiculousness of Labour's new vape ban, disposable vape ban. Shock horror, it turns out you can still buy them absolutely everywhere, as far as I can tell, and the police aren't enforcing it. The other big one, of course, is the man who burnt the Koran. He is on my show. I've done an interview with him. He explains why he did it. He also has a very stark message and a warning for Sir Keir Starmer and indeed the West about whether or not we have allowed radical Islamism into the UK, and we are also pandering to it. So all of that and much, much more to help kickstart your week after your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Now, things are going to take a bit of a change as we go through the next 24 hours. There's some heavy rain, some strong winds pushing through, and a slightly fresher feel following in behind. It's all due to a cold front that is coming in from the northwest, and it's going to progress southeastwards across the whole country as we go through the rest of today and tomorrow. So across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, a pretty wet picture overnight, some high rainfall totals, some strong blustery winds, and that rain later feeding into parts of northern and western England and Wales as well. Most places are going to see temperatures holding up in double figures, partly because of the unsettled weather. Then as we go through tomorrow morning, in the southeast, actually clinging on to some fine weather for a little while longer. So a dry start here, some early sunshine, but elsewhere across much of England and Wales, a pretty cloudy and damp start to the day, and watch out for those blustery winds as well. Meanwhile, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, yes, the more persistent rain will have pushed through, but there will be plenty of showers around, and some of these showers will be fairly heavy. There could even be the odd rumble of thunder, maybe a bit of hail mixed in as we go through the day. Also need to be aware of the blustery winds. The strongest winds will be along the front as it goes through, but towards the north and west we could still be looking at some strong gusts in coastal parts. Meanwhile, towards the southeast, that rain eventually arrives as we head towards lunchtime and lingers for a time during the afternoon before eventually clearing away, and for all of us a bit of a fresher feel compared to recent days, despite the fact that there will be some sunshine on offer. Also some sunshine on offer as we go through Wednesday, but again we're likely to see a fair few showers around, most frequent, most widespread towards the north, but as we go through the afternoon they are going to